All right, so today we're going to talk about an artist named David Hockney. David is a great artist and someone it's kind of interesting to talk about as it relates to Henri Matisse. He sort of has some of those Fauvist instincts that Henri had during some of the ways that he worked. But David had some very unique methods that he sort of pioneered, and we're going to take a look at some of those. He was an English painter born July 9th, 1937, in Bradford, England. To pursue his passion of art, he attended the Bradford Art School, continued at the Royal College of Art in London. And artist of many talents, known for the colorful landscapes, portraits, and collage-like photographs. And we're going to focus most on those collage-like photographs, or the collage photography he did, and those bright, colorful paintings. Today they say he splits his time living between London, England, and Malibu, California. I don't know that he does a whole lot of anything nowadays. Many of Hockney's artworks are inspired by Cubism, and that particularly as it relates to his photographs. Hockney used Cubism as an inspiration for many of his photographic collages, and we're going to take a look at how um, he kind of responded to Cubism. Cubism um, was a very popular genre of art that was taking hold, and he was kind of responding. And we can kind of look at how his work is similar. And so we're gonna. This is a work of Popova, excuse me, and and when we look at sort of how the Cubists broke down what it was they were painting or examining in their artworks, um, often looking at multiple angles of something, or kind of breaking down each individual piece so it would allow you to focus more as we, for instance, see not just the face here, but each individual area broken into the little pieces. So it makes you want to really kind of focus on that. And that's sort of what Hockney was doing. Um, and when we look at sort of the process by which he created, and we're going to take a look at that in just a second, you'll see how he works in his studio and collages these pieces. But when he was in the space, and we'll look at how he kind of got started with some of these in the Grand Canyon, converting into these large, um, colorful paintings he would do. The idea really behind these photo collages is that whatever it is that you're looking at is really too big to be captured in a single image. And that's, again, sort of the mindset that Cubists were often sort of kind of going with. And so we're going to look at how he becomes inspired by this trip to the Grand Canyon. Um, Anyone who's ever been to Grand Canyon talks about the uh, how small you feel and how overwhelming and vast it is. It's kind of like standing at the edge of the ocean and for the first time and recognizing the enormity of the space. And so as Hockney looked down into the Grand Canyon, he recognized how this really played in very well to his sort of understanding of art, in that you couldn't capture it in one single little image. And so he turned to that collage style uh, photography. So it talks about here he spent much of his time in all the landscapes that surrounded him, and he found a landscape that inspired him the very most. He traveled back um, to the Grand Canyon and began to take these pictures. And he when he looked into the Grand Canyon, his eyes moved out of space, and he knew that it was more than one thing that he could capture. He had to have all these different little um, images that he would capture, and that's kind of what he did. He looked around and took lots of little photographs. He then gets back. He collages these into a large um, photo collage of the Grand Canyon. This large image that he then translates into a painting. And uh, one of the reasons I say we kind of want to maybe compare him a little bit to Matisse is we see that similar use of color that the Fauvists use, that bold use of color. And while we don't necessarily consider uh, him to be a Fauvist, and sort of similar in the way that you use color, but not necessarily the way you use brushstrokes and so forth. But we look at that use of color, and we see again how he's broken this down into these little bitty images, and that kind of come together and collage together just like his photographs did to create the individual or to create the single image. Every artist has their own unique art process that they follow to create their artwork. Hockney began this colorful landscape painting of the Grand Canyon by taking many photographs of the different parts and cropping them, piecing them together into the photo collage, and then help capture that that big space. I love this piece. I think it's really nice. But this is very reminiscent of lots of his landscapes. When creating photo collages with different parts, artists like Hockney use line to connect two or more parts together in a way that creates unity. And so we're going to look at, particularly in some of his installations, how he used this idea of line to connect these spaces and these images together. Hockney created photo collage by arranging small photographs in a way that displays the details of a large, overwhelming landscape. Each of the photographs used to create the collage is divided and spaced by thick, straight, parallel lines. These lines connect each of the photographs together, creating unity and movement in the artwork. And so, they're talking about brainstorming for the way that they have you do some of the projects, and we're going to pass over uh, well, I'll go back just for a second. This is sort of similar to one of the options that you're going to have to do your make day. And so I'll leave this here just from so you can kind of see. One of the options you have is to take a photograph, several photographs. Take your camera off your phone if you have a digital camera. If you have Polaroids are great. I don't know if you have any of those still, but they still make them. Um, I have a few around, and but those work great. But if you don't have something like that, you can print your images out and cut and collage and paste. You can also take those same images, put them into something like Sketchpad, one of the online programs that we use, and you can cut and literally paste, if you will, all those images into a single image and create a photo collage. So that's one of the ways that you can complete this week's Make Day. And of course, we'll talk more about that on the Make Day. And at the end of the class, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the options you have for Make Day. Portraits the installation art, and we're not really going to focus much on the portraits, but I do want to talk about the installation art. Like many other artists, Hockney paints portraits and still lifes in addition to creating photo collages. In fact, Hockney has even created a few pieces of installation art during his career. What kinds of lines do you spot in this installation piece? And they focus down here um, on this with the lines that you see of these blue benches, and noticing how the blue benches kind of direct your eye in and around the space. There's a blue bench here that sort of ties all the other blue benches. So it makes the installation piece relevant to the work of art itself. But we also see line being used here to direct the eye and the floor as we see the parallel lines that run back into space. We see those same types of parallel lines being used in the floor that's created in this area where these chairs are. The chairs themselves have lots of lines that run parallel to each other that help direct and create that movement that we see in the eye. And finally, we see these lines here that are used to create and tie these spaces together. So that's how Hockney used line. Um, it's how a lot of artists use line is to tie things together and create that unity. All those little lines are like webbing in a spider web, and they literally connect each of those individual elements and bring them together and help create that unity. The reason that they belong together. We're going to skip movement and portraits because we're not really going to look at a lot of that portraiture work. Adding one or more subjects in artwork can pack the artwork full of hidden meanings. Closely examine the following hockney artworks, and using what you know about line of movement, what do you think the meaning of each of these artworks is? And so, when we're looking at line and movement, particularly in works like Hockney, we're looking at how he's using these different elements, not necessarily for the meaning, the hidden meaning, as in um, what kind of mysteries being needs to be solved, but more in how is he using the elements to direct the line and direct the eye. And so, for instance, we see these vertical and horizontal lines um, that direct the eye and help create this space. The understanding that this is a wide space they're standing on. It moves back into the space. We see these vertical lines that bring our eye into the upper area of the painting. That's how he's using all of these different elements. The floor isn't just there because that's what the floor was supposed to look like. He's created specific elements in that flooring or in that ground that direct the eye, that create the movement that he's intended. When we look at chairs in front of chair sits in front of British the chair. This is a chair in front of chair. And so the repeated use of the lines is one of the ways that you can recognize how they're using line to tie the pieces together, literally sort of create that repetition that we've seen other artists use. If you'll look at even these lines going on in the framing around, it's not an accident that they are the same value, if not the exact same color, so that they tie together with the wood of the chair, with the chair and the painting. Again, using all the line to tie everything together. Studio time, and we're going to talk about sort of how you can create a landscape of your own. We're not going to really do it in the same way that they show in that. We're going to talk about that again here towards the end. Oh, let's go back here. So yes, he was often inspired by the Yorkshire woods in England. When we look at his landscape paintings, and those were dominated by these trees. Trees are vertical things; they shoot up into the sky, of course, and so you're going to see a lot of that repetition of those vertical lines as a prominent element in his work during this period. But it's also important to notice that those aren't the only lines. He's creating lines that go vertically, horizontally, lines that create the movement that you see in paths. And one of the reasons I like looking at Hockney's work as it relates to here in Kentucky, we have a lot of these very similar types of landscapes. You can choose. You can go right out your back door very likely, and you probably have a little thicket of woods that you might be able to take a picture of that resembles something you see here. So we have a lot of great spaces that have these sort of similar things going on. Little roads that curve and go back and create these little curves, these little paths, if you will, that direct our eye back into space. The same thing happens with these spaces that we see happening in the sky above those roads and paths and so forth. We see these horizontal lines. We often think of those uh, um, the horizon lines as being level. Of course, in Kentucky, we've got a lot of mountains and hills, and so our horizon lines are also often horizontal. They're talking about lining up these, recognizing that you do have these horizontal lines that kind of define um, your horizons, but you also have tons of these verticals, just like in uh, the woods he's painted and he became familiar with. This looks like something that you would find just about anywhere in Kentucky. And again, it's one of the reasons it's nice to kind of compare his work to some of the local artists and artists we have working in and around Kentucky. Jim Foose is a painter who taught at the University of Kentucky. His paintings are very reminiscent of some of what Hockney did. These roads that have these lines that again direct our eyes back into this deep space. We see that all the time in our little rolling mountains and hills around here. And so this talks a little bit about what happens when we look at Hockney's work from different distances. One of the things that is paramount in his work is size, scale, making things really big. And so when an artist works in this enormous canvas size, it really allows for various types of experiences with that individual work of art. So if we are standing far away from the experience we have is very related to this vertical lines that we see, and the space is dominated by these bright, colorful lines that shoot up. But as you step closer and you get a little closer to it, and right here, that space changes, and what we see and what we focus on changes, and so now we start looking at this texture that's created by the trees and I mean the leaves and the weeds and so forth and the grasses here. The little patterns and textures created by the flowers. And now the vertical lines, because we're now close, are less emphasized, and we are kind of captured by that pattern that's created with that orange and blue and orange and blue and orange and blue here. And again, as you kind of, look at it from different angles, different spaces, different distances, the things that become important, now we see sort of that combination where we're appreciating all the little pattern and texture we see going on and how that relates to that space that's in the background that we see going on behind those trees. When we look close up, I should stop here. When we look close up, you'll see the emphasis on the brushstroke, and we see the emphasis on that pattern created by that brushstroke. And again, this is sort of why we talk about him very often when we and in comparison to the Fauvist, to Henri Matisse and those wild beasts that use those broad brushstrokes, you'll see broad use of color, very similar to the Fauvist. We saw the trees that were purple and orange instead of being grays and browns that you might normally see. So, adding details to your landscape, they're just talking here a little bit about creating leaves, trees, grasses that are accurate, if you will. Looking for what kinds of trees do you have in the spaces around you. If you're doing paintings of um, the landscape around you, you're probably going to see pine trees. You might see a lot of oaks, maples. You might even have a hickory tree. Things that are indigenous to the Kentucky and the spaces around us. If you're in a neighborhood, you might have dogwoods and stuff and so you want to kind of understand, look at what makes that tree shape. If you're using trees in your paintings, what makes a maple tree a maple tree is that maple leaf. And so, understanding that if you are doing a close up of something and that involves that pattern you're creating with those tree leaves, do your best to kind of accurately recreate and depict that type of foliage that you're including. All right, so we're going to talk about your make day, and before we do, we're going to talk about your attendance question answer of the day. The attendance answer of the week, actually, that's a day. The attendance answer of the week is Georges Braque. He was a major 20th century French painter, collagist, draftsman, printmaker, and sculptor. His most important contributions to the history of art were in his alliance with Fauvism and the role he played in the development of Cubism. And so you can kind of see why I've chosen him as our attendance answer. He sort of plays a role in that marriage of those and transition of those styles of art. In that upper image on the right, we see those Fauvist influences, those bright colors, broad brush strokes, and in the lower one, we see the those broken images, the lines that are being used to separate and individualize these little areas within the painting that we see from the Cubist artwork. Now let's talk about Make Day. Make Day options for David Hockney. Yeah, that's he's getting up there. Comparing Hockney to Cubism. So you may want to do a Cubist styled photograph collage or photo collage. This can be an interior space. It might be an exterior space. The exterior should be over the this space. Interior or exterior. You can either choose to do a space in your home. If you want to step outside the house and there's something in your neighborhood you find interesting, if you're downtown, that's a great place to get some nice images to use for a Hockney inspired work of art. And we'll talk about the actual process that you'll use to complete those works on our Make Day. The second option is to do a Hockney inspired landscape, and this would require you to go out and either find a landscape that you like, take a photograph of it. You can use even your Chromebook. You can do a couple of different things with these, and again, we'll talk more about this on the Make Day. But you could do these in acrylic, watercolors, the pastels, any color media you have, and of course, as always, this is the type of painting that lends itself well to the chrome canvas, the sketch pad, and those types of applications. I look forward to seeing you on the Make Day. Thank you so much, and have a great day.